Hi everyone, so now we're going into another Arcane deep dive. Now I want to look at what I consider very unusual situation in episode 9. Now, what I mean by that is there are antagonists who are giving important choices to make in this series. Now, usually what normally happens is that it's the protagonists that are the person who has to make important and difficult decisions. So now when we look at, for example, the example that kind of is brought up by Victor is that there's always decisions to make, even though you may not want to make them. I mean, after all, disarming a grenade is something you have to do whether you really want to or not. But the whole idea is in normal storytelling, it's the bad guy that basically is the person getting people to make decisions. So you would usually think about, a certain situation where, for example, like, the bad guy would force Spider-Man. Does he choose, his girlfriend or save the city, or does Spider-Man kill, the bad guy in order to prevent the whole city going up in flames? I mean, you see this over and over and over again in fantasy, science fiction, superhero stories. It's the bad guy that forces the hero to make some sort of important and very difficult decision. But in Arcane, this really doesn't happen so much. In fact, the way you look at it is like most likely the hero will choose X. And for them, maybe there is some sort of sacrifice involved, but you're thinking pretty much they're going to do this and they're not going to do something else. So let me look at how it looks from the point of view when we're looking at the antagonist, not the protagonist. So the first one we actually look is in episode 9 is Savika's part. This is the earliest part. Now Savika, pretty much from episode 8 or so, has been given the choice whether to betray Silco or not, because the thing is, things are happening within the organization, and Finn is thinking this is an opportunity after the factory was attacked, that maybe it's time for Silco to go. And we've pretty much set up that Savika is not happy with a certain situation. She's not happy that Jinx is a loose cannon. She's not happy that the fact that Silco is concerned about Jinx, and this is, causing all kinds of problems. Plus, we've seen before that Savika has, changed sides when Vander wasn't doing a good job of controlling the situation with the Undercity and the built-over cops. So there was reason for the people who are watching the show to think, well, is she going to go with Silco or is she going to go with Finn? I mean, you're like, I don't know. I mean, there could be circumstances where she might think that it would not be a good idea. And some people may look at this particular episode and wonder, why did she stay with Silco? Why did she stay loyal? I mean, after all, he was, allowing things to happen that were not good. Silco was, of course, having issues with Marcus. And of course, there was the whole situation where the bridge was basically sealed off, or well, not completely, but it was causing damage to the business. And Silco was saying, look, it's under my orders. He's taking care of it. Whether Silco was just saying that just to show that he was in control or not is a separate issue. But you could see exactly from Savika's point of view that things are not, going in the best direction. So, why did she make the decision is kind of the interesting thing. Now, I actually go through that in Savika's video that I created a while ago. But, the basic thing is Silco has a vision, Vander never did, and that was one of the biggest reasons why Savika changed, because he's like, if Vander, even if he allowed, the cops to push him over a little bit, it's like the long-term goal would be the independence of Zom, but Vander was like status quo, and it's like you didn't see a way out of that. It just like it was going to be like built over pushing people over for all of eternity. Whereas Silco has a clear end goal, and while he does have some liabilities, those liabilities don't seem to get in the way too much to Savika's satisfaction. And the fact is that if we look at Finn, and what has Finn been saying, he has no vision. So if you were going to pick someone, you would pick Silco. Now that is something that you really have to watch Savika's lines fairly carefully from episode to episode to really catch that, because a lot of the more obvious stuff in the show pretty much gives you enough information to think, ooh, this could be a tough thing to decide. And Silco's also on the same wavelength here, because if you look at the entire setup of this scene, you think that even Silco's is concerned that maybe Savika would actually betray him, and Savika pretty much says as much, as if there was someone better that she would. I mean, not explicitly, but you can really catch it from how she phrases things. So, this is the first instance, and basically the first, not quite third of through the episode, of where the antagonist, not the protagonist, has to make a decision due to the circumstances of choosing one side or the other. And protagonists are not really making huge decisions in this episode, at least from their point of view. Now you might say, wait a minute, there was Mel, right? He's like, yeah, but that was in line with her beliefs. It's like, she was already, exiled. It's like, how big of a deal was that really for her emotionally? Oh, sure, Jace went out and created a peace treaty, which is kind of the next thing that we're going to look at here. But from his point of view, after everything that happened, was that like some huge decision that he had to, worry about? No, that was not the thing. In fact, what's really interesting here is the fact that Jace puts the ball in Silco's court. So up until this particular point, Silco has this huge goal that everything that he has been trying up to this point has been creating the independent nation of Zon. And he doesn't really care how he does it. He's been creating power. He's the Shrimmer drug lord. He tried to basically kill, Vander and his kids. I mean, this is not a nice guy here. All for his purpose. He's kind of painted as not only a criminal, type of person, but also an ideologue of sorts. So when you look at this, you normally would think that the huge decision would be the one that Chase or Vi would have to make. You could imagine a scenario where Silco, with the help of Jinx, creates a super powerful weapon and just pretty much states, look, I want the independence of Zon. If you're not doing it, I'm going to unleash this weapon on, the council and blow everybody up. So you do what I say. Otherwise, everyone's going to get wiped out. And that would be kind of a typical situation that most superhero movies go. The supervillain has the super powerful weapon, and it's going to destroy the city, and then the good guys have to do something to disarm the weapon or whatever to save the day. That doesn't happen here. It's pretty obvious from episode 8 that Hextech weapons are pretty powerful. They pretty much knocked out half of Silco's production capability here. So, what's the situation? Jace is like, wait a minute, we need to pull things back. We don't want to go over the brink and just cause all kinds of chaos in the Undercity here. Let's go for peace. Alright, so, Silco, it's your decision. Look, all I want is Jinx. Everything else, negotiable. What kind of choice will you make? And this is the toughest choice that Silco has to make. Because it's like, Jinx is his daughter, my surrogate daughter, so to speak. And different people have different theories about how to actually look at Jinx, whether she's the embodiment of Zon or not. And I don't exactly quite agree with that statement, but Silco is almost in the same position as Vander was, and there were clear parallels that were painted. And you can, in the scene where Silco is talking to Vander's statue is a classic, and I actually talk about that in a different video. But it's like this type of scene, this one right here, is just not. It rarely happens in any type of storytelling, whether it's fantasy, science fiction, superheroes. The big bad of this entire show is not usually the person who is forced to make a decision. You know, the good guys don't say, look, here's my ultimatum, take it or leave it, chum. That never happens. It's always the bad guy who has a lot of power at the very end, who is forcing the good guys to make decisions. This is so absolutely wonderful when you think about it, of just taking that trope and just reversing it. So, okay. So, now I said there are 3 scenes here. So, we've already said that Silco's number 2 person has been forced to make a huge decision, or whether choosing to either betray Silco or not. And she goes with Silco. Then you have Silco. Does he either agree with his dream of creating the nation of Zon, or does he choose his daughter? And what we see is that Silco chooses Jinx, surrogate daughter. So that is the decision that he makes. Now, then we're left with the final big decision here, which is Jinx. So this is the other kind of bookending of that scene, the last scene in this entire show, which is just a fabulous way to end the show. Well, the last part, people are probably going to say, wait a minute, it didn't quite end yet. True. Now, the thing is here, this scene is, it doesn't exactly seem exactly like a choice, but it is. Let's just look at this. So, in the case of Jinx, basically in the beginning of this entire scene, Jinx offers Vi a choice, so to speak. And basically, you know, you can either choose a powder or the Jinx chair if only you shoot Vi. You know. So if you're looking at that, you're like, okay, what is the likelihood that Vi would say yes to that? And this is what most people think. Nope, that's not good. That's not gonna work that way. So, you know, Vi says, no, I can't do that. I mean, it's very quick. There's not like long silence here. It's like, no, I can't do that. And that's kind of it. So the confrontation continues, of course, going back and forth of you know, maybe running away together and that sort of thing. And this scene really isn't about Vi being forced to make some sort of ultimatum. You know, do I decide to kill, you know, Caitlyn or not? That's not really on the table. I mean, it seems to be sort of on the table as far as Jinx was concerned in that moment, but really that wasn't the major decision that needed to be made. The major decision that needed to be made was whether Jinx herself was going to finally, for the time being, decide that she would accept herself as who she is. She has become Jinx. She's up until this point, you would see parts of Powder, and it's kind of parts of the character who is not really sure of who she is, kind of going back and forth a little bit. And she makes an instinctual decision when Silco shoots at Vi to, of course, shoot Silco. And for her, it's very tragic because of basically, even in that situation, Silco just basically says, Jinx, you're perfect as you are. And clearly, in this scene, Vi is only thinking about Jinx as Powder. And that is very natural from Vi's point of view, because she's basically been missing for the next, 6 or 7 years and doesn't even have a good idea of what's really going on. So it's like, even though you've sort of seen how far Jinx has changed, it's very hard for Provide to really get a hold of this particular situation. So after that big final confrontation, Jinx really realizes that, of course, Silco was the person who accepted she as she was, and that she should, of course, make the decision of accepting her who she is. And that is the final decision. So when you look at it from that lens, then the question really becomes, Arcane is whose story? And the thing is, basically, Arcane's is, for the most part, Jinx's story. And while in most cases of storytelling, you would think that the good guys are the protagonists of the story, the people who, of course, you would normally root for. You want this to actually become a good situation. And even in a tragedy, still what ends up happening is the quote unquote good guy makes a bad decision and then things further fall apart and the person dies or something like that. But in this case, here, you could easily argue that this story is basically about Jinx and about Silco more than it's about Vi and it's about Jace or any of the other characters that we would normally consider the good guys of the story. If you look at the way the story is structured, the people who make the major decisions, as far as the story is concerned, if you look at how much time is being spent, it would be the people on Silco and Jinx's side. So that is why in the end, there's so much airtime that is spent with the situation with Savika, with the situation with Silco, and the situation with Jinx in one single episode. The major decisions are made by the people who we would normally consider the antagonists of the show. When the show is saying, hello, these people are not the antagonists of the show. They are the protagonists of the show. Everything is switched. And that's why when you actually see the very last scene here, probably the most tragic scene of the entire show is like, we've set it up so that there could be peace. Everything could be easily done in a peaceful manner, even though there's been so much tragedy that has happened in the last bit of the episode, that Jinx makes the final decision to, of course, blow up the, Piltover Council. Again, it is the quote-unquote antagonist making the decisions and taking action, as opposed to the protagonists, quote-unquote, the protagonists or the good guys, taking actions, doing things proactively to save the day. So that's kind of my take on it. When you actually look at episode 9, the key thing here probably is this scene, the most unusual scene of any storytelling, where the bad guy is making the biggest key decision of the entire show, as opposed to the good guys doing it. And that is surrounded by people close to him also making important decisions. The bad guys are not usually the people who make the decisions, it's usually the good guys. And by just changing that trope around in Arcane, just makes Arcane such a wonderful story. And I just love, looking at how Arcane really adds and changes the tropes that you would normally see in other shows. There's so much depth and so much more to look into. And I'll do that in another video. So see you in a different video. Bye bye.